keep an eye as people are still trying to get in, but we'll get rolling. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Jeff Muir. I'm the Director of Coaching and Player Development for Missouri. And we are pleased to have with us Kirk Nelson, who is going to be doing the majority of the speaking this evening on the topic of periodization, something that I really didn't think a lot about until a few years ago when I got exposed to some concepts and ideas. Kirk is currently the head associate women's coach at Missouri State University. He is a U.S. Scout. He is our region girls 2004 head coach, and he does work with our ODP program as a technical advisor as well here in Missouri. So we're pleased to have Kirk. Periodization is a topic that can really, you can drill down, and there's a lot to it. People spend their lives studying it. I asked Kirk to talk a little bit about it because he teaches this portion of the National C course, and he does a lot of work with it with his Missouri State women's team. So we're not going to, we're going to try and keep it to something that can benefit the majority of us, try and get you some big ideas about it, and then hopefully spur you on to do a little more research and digging on it. So Kirk, without further ado, actually, I'll mention this. We will let Kirk give his presentation. It's about 30 minutes. I may interject a little bit throughout the session, just asking some questions, but at the end, we will go through the chat and we'll stay on for 10, 15 minutes afterwards and answer some questions. So if you can all keep your mics muted, that would be great. And Kirk, you can take the control of the screen and go for it.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Hello, everybody.
I've got the recording going too, Kirk.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming and spending some time with us this evening. Coach Jeff approached me a couple weeks ago about bringing this topic to the state, and there are some, as I saw, recognize some names that are some coaches that are from beyond the state as well. So that's fantastic. So I'm gonna just so you know a little bit about my background. He kind of told you my current titles, but just from a coaching standpoint, I coached high school for about 13 years, coached multiple levels of club as well as college and semi-pro. And this information, just to prompt it, is geared towards the players that are about 13 and older. So they've hit kind of their puberty has started, where this information can be really valuable to that skill set. So basically the 11-11 game model. So I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint. Hold on. Jeff, can you guys see that?
Yeah, we're good. Thanks.
All right, so periodization. I'm gonna hit on the physical periodization. There's multiple categories that are dealt with, whether it's cognitive and different things, but I'm gonna focus on where the physical component that you can hopefully apply some of this back in your environments. Here's our 3 objectives for today. 1 is to give you some basic information. 2, how can I, meaning all of us, apply this to my upcoming season? And then a little bit about RPE and recovery and adaptation. And the goal of mine personally and Coach Jeff's is just to get everyone on this video chat to start thinking about it if you haven't already, and then maybe giving some little tidbits if you're already actively doing it. And I did want to put this disclaimer in because this is coming from a coach to a coach. These are exactly things that I did over the course of the last 3 years to start to implement this topic. So it's not coming from a scientist or anything like that, other than tips that I've gotten from experts in the field, and then how you can directly apply it with your kiddos. So I'm just giving you my personal experiences, and hopefully it'll help you out a bit. So this was pretty profound. So in the last 3 seasons, since 2017 to now, we've had 0 soft tissue injuries in both the college and the club environments that I've actively coached in. So whether it's Missouri State or for my son's club team here in the spring. So he's a high school age boy. And also in ODP, when we only see those players maybe at a regional event or something for a few days and they have games, we're able to apply it a little bit there too, to make sure that they're fresh for each of the games. So a soft tissue injury would be a hamstring pull or a groin pull or a quad, not necessarily your player steps off the curb wrong and tweaks their ankle, or a concussion or ACL. It's more about those little pulls and things that kind of keep them and limit them sometimes for a couple of days and sometimes for the entire rest of the season. So this is pretty profound that this has happened the last couple of years with some of the basics that I'll talk about. This was a great result from it too, is a stronger connection with your student athletes. And once I was starting getting feedback from the players and getting information from them and having discussions with them based on the information I was collecting, it really strengthened our bond. And I thought it was very powerful because we all care about our kiddos, and it starts to show through this. And it's just some helpful dialogue to help them through that. And it just grows that connection that you have. And then I just use these as a guide and a template, and then build from this each season. So this is driven how I prepare for an upcoming season. All right, and then here's two quotes. So the one on the left, and then there's Dr. John Cohn here right on the right side. So he's one of my mentors. He's currently the person that kind of drives the coaching education for U.S. Soccer. And his wife, you might know, is Cindy Parlow Cohn, who's the new president for the United Soccer Federation, State Soccer Federation. And so he asked in a class, this was about late 2016, he asked all of us in the room, want to peak, and we all answered things like playoffs, and it was a lot of answers towards the tail end or state cup or whatever the case may be, which is certainly correct. But he said, why would you not want to peak every game? And so when he went to explain, we're all like, yeah, that'd be great. So but when he went to explain it, is you're at different, let's say, levels that you can obtain during the season, but you want to perform to the highest level that you can at that point. So you're trying to peak in that moment and be able to perform in the games. And that's what he meant by peaking every game. So here's a curve. So I just want to make sure it's clear. This is what was exposed to me. Dr. Cohn asked that question, and now this is where the journey began for me. And so they flashed up this curve, and some of you might be very familiar with this and probably higher level graphics than the one I created. But the idea behind it is that you're at this, let's say, baseline here. Across the horizontal axis is time, and it's in hours. So this is 20 hours, 40 hours, and so forth. And then this looks about player readiness. So let me grab a pen here in a second. But the idea is the players play a game, or they have a high load, heavy load training session, and they fatigue. So they go down into this trough down here, and then they start to recover. So they start that upswing, and it's over time. And then they're adapting. So, and then this is a fancy term, super compensation. So their body is trying to get them to a better place because they have worked out. And then if you don't do anything over time, it'll just settle back to baseline and maybe even further down if you stop working out. But the idea is it takes 72 to 96 hours on average for some of those high school level and older athletes or age athletes to recover from a single game. Now there are variables, so you could play less, play more, but I'm going to talk, and this is the starting point for me. So that was profound when I said 3 days. I didn't know that, and I didn't realize it took that long, especially with the schedules that we all have, which are crazy, and they go against us quite a bit. But that's it. And it could be, if they're a little bit on the younger age and maybe their games are shorter than 90 minutes, it's further down here, but it's still 2+ days to recover if they've played a really hard game or had a heavy load. And so those of you out there, this was interesting. Then we start to do this where, okay, here's about a day. So then you start to go back up. And if you have a game the next day, you're going to hit it again. So they go down like this. I can't even go that far low down on my screen and start to come up back over here. And so it takes even longer for them to do that. And then if we're hitting them again hard and hard, and this is where those multiple heavy loads, which is called overtraining, is going to result in injuries. And so I've been able to try to control what I can control to have the result I talked about earlier. So let me just pop out of this. All right. Okay. And then, so this was the first intro to me. And then now some basics on this. So just for simplicity's sake, because this is kind of how I started to grasp it, is just the three basic loads. There's a lot of load definitions in between, whether it's threshold and different stuff, but just to keep it straightforward, let's just say low, medium, and high load. And a low load will push the curve so recovery won't be as much and it won't take as long. And medium will go further down, and then high would be the one that we just saw earlier. So those would be the three that I'm just going to use throughout the rest of the presentation. So a couple things that I started to gather some information. So a match or a heavy training load session, I just mentioned this, 72 to 96 hours to recover and adapt. Okay. And then 24 hours after a match or a heavy load should be a recovery day. And in that recovery day, you could have them off, or you could do some type of recovery session. So that's what it should be. These are what we would hope for. These are the ideals. And then if you have 2 matches or more per week, okay, you should not then add another heavy training load session in there. So if you have a week or a microcycle, but we'll just call it a week, and you have 2 matches already set, then you shouldn't be adding in a heavy training load session in general. So it should be 2 max per week if possible, which isn't the reality all the time. And then if you do have that maximum 2 match, avoid them in consecutive days. So back to back, which I just showed you with the pen on how it hits them back to back and takes a lot longer to recover from that. So there's the basics. That's the curve. That's where I started. So this was for me, a light bulb moment. And I was like, wow, is this real? Is this really something that I could apply? And so I had to kind of build from there. How do I do this back at the university with low to zero money in my club environment? I don't, how do I do this where it's not going to cost me hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars to try to track all this and stuff? So here's how I started to plan. So in a week, so you can see right here, we have Saturday, Sunday, Monday through Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday. So it's important to know where your games are prior and then where you're going with it. And let's say your schedule in a club or whatever has you training Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. So you have 1 game and you have 3 training sessions. So they're going to be considered heavy load, so high load. So you actually have a week where you have 1. I'm sorry?
Because your brain come calling me. Come on.
If you guys could please mute your microphones, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
So if you've got a week where you only have this 1 load and then this one's coming up, so you theoretically, according to those basic ideas, I could add another heavy load session in this. So here's one possible option is you're recovering, so you're 2 days, 48 hours. So maybe you can hit them a little bit with a medium, and then it'll just take them a little bit to get back here to this full, and then you hit them here, but then the next day would have to be a recovery day. And then it'll allow you to recover for the game that you have starting in the next cycle. So this is what it could look like. So this is what I started to piece together on my own based on those couple previous slides. So I'm going to throw this out to you guys. So here's 2 games. So you got back-to-back, which is not ideal, but we all have this scenario. And you got the same 3 days for training, and then you got a set of 2 games coming up in the next week. So if you had these days to train, I want you to just take 10 seconds or so and think of what you would put in these 3 days. So I'll just give you a chance to think about it.
And Kirk, while they're thinking, a little bit later in the presentation, I think you'll kind of give some examples of what a low training load might look like. A couple of examples, right?
As far as with the, yes, correct.
Okay, sounds good. Just want to share a couple of those ideas with people.
All right, let's see what you guys came up with. So going with, we had 2 matches, 24 hours after a match, whether it's single or double, recovery session, they're still recovering. It should theoretically the recovery session could help, but it's going to take 96 plus hours to get back. So you could probably hit a medium, and then you're probably going to want to help that recovery again to get them all the way back to here by the end of the week because of this back-to-back hit by the loads. So this is one. Some could argue maybe this might be a little bit higher here where you could go and stretch them a bit. But like I said, I just wanted to keep it for simplicity's sake that there's the 3 different levels. And then notice there are no high. So you've got 2 in here. Whoops. You got 2 in here, and you don't want to add another one in general to your group because then you're going to increase their chance of injury. So let's take another look. So here's another one that we all deal with. So you've got 4 games on a weekend. So let's say you've played in a tournament and then you still have league play the next week, or this could be a potential high school schedule where you might even have more training days in here, or a college schedule where there might be a day off in between, but that would be a recovery day. So let's just take 10 seconds and see what you would put in these 3 areas, training days. All right, so here's what I got. So greens, so it's gonna be, you might say I could do this, but the idea of 4, you've put the players that have played all 4 of these games, they're gonna take quite a while to recover. And so if you hit them again here, they're not gonna be back to where they need to be by the next game. So
I would have went off on Monday.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, if you guys could just hold your comments till the end or just jot down or send them over in the chat, we'll let Kurt keep going.
So it's just, I wanted to stress the point, you got to be careful, even aware of, especially unless you had no games here. So maybe, but there is, you got 2 league games coming up. So that's 3 examples. Here's my start at this for a season. So what I did I started this shows August 2016, but basically I did this in October of 2016 when I then had all this information and started to piece it together. So I was already way into the season. So, but I wanted to attempt and look back. So this is like our August preseason. This might be those of you that coach the high school boys or a high school team, you might be doing this with 2-a-days and stuff before school starts. So this was it. You could see I just used, there's different levels, recovery, maintenance, fitness, preparative, but I just use low, medium, and high to keep it simple for me. And then days off, I put in games. This would be against Little Rock that we were playing. Here's against Arkansas State. So those I put as highs. So UMKC, I put those as highs. So any of your games, that's how I would list them. And so it just goes through. This started to change where we started to have double, it was more of a regular rhythm. And you can see there are not many H's outside of the games, if any. And that was just how I started to kind of take all this in and go through it based on what we just did with some of those examples. And this is October. So same thing, and then finish the season off. So this is about where I started to do this, to look back. And I can tell you, and I'm being honest, we had a lot more high load sessions in September and in August in this season. And it resulted in some injuries. We had soft tissue injuries. We also had what's called, the fancy way is residual fatigue. So it's fatigue over time so that it builds up. And I'll use an example of, sometimes you don't think of this, but we had a player, I'll just call her Mary. And she was an all conference player for us. And this was her junior year. And we were going through the season, and I found out about this time that she was doing some running on her own because she was one of the fittest players on our team. She was just that overachiever. And I basically started to talk to her about this and backing off, because what happened is when we went into our conference play in towards the tail end of October, she wasn't as sharp as she normally would have been because she was doing extra stuff, plus the fact that we had some high load training sessions. And so a player like that, who is a leader and a captain-like player on the field and one of the best in our conference, she wasn't as sharp, and that was a big part of it. She didn't get injured, which is great, luckily, but man, she was not as quick as she was because of that. And so she just didn't understand. No one had ever told her to back off. So Jeff, I showed you, this is where I evolved to. So this is when it really started to take in with me. So I got prepared for the 2017 season, got fancy with the calendar and the colors. So you can see low, medium, and high. And I started like I did in 16, but now I said, okay, in June or in May, which is coming up, I will sit down and go through this for the season. I will do that in the next few weeks here as well. Hoping that we're, playing again on time and stuff, but just that's how I'll attack the season. So I'll go through the rules. I'll put in all of our games, exhibition games. So you could do this with high school. You could do this with club. So put it all in. We had days off by the NCAA when classes started. You'd have days, you wouldn't necessarily train 7 days a week. So you'd have some days that would be off, put in your training days and so forth. And we had some lifting going on. And then I put in that stuff. So you can see medium, not a lot of highs outside other than in preseason when we didn't have games coming yet. So we could hit them early. And this one too, a lot of us do fitness tests when they come back, whether they're club level or whatever. So they have to have a decent base when they come in. Otherwise you spike them like this, that can lead to injury too. So having conversations with your players a couple months out and giving them this information to make sure that, because if you hit them really hard here, they're not in a good spot. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's go to the next month. All right, so I want you to take 20 seconds there back at where you're watching and see where you might you could hit them with the heaviest load training session. So there's your games calendar. Don't worry about days off. So just take 20, 30 seconds and see where you could hit it. And then I'll put the schedule up for you to check what you got.
Kirk, and as they're working on that, spending a few seconds doing that, just to clarify, this is something once you got a basic understanding of periodization and how this can help your team and maximize them and their potential and relieve the risk of soft tissue injuries. You sat down and did this as a physical first. This is before you talked about anything tactically. You went through and you did this and just with physical in mind.
Yes, that's a great point, Jeff. So appreciate you reminding me to bring that up. You'll notice that I didn't put any of our topics or training sessions or any of that stuff in there. So this is where I started. So whether you're working on, attacking out of the defensive third or whatever your topics might be, some of the clubs have set curriculums. High school, you'll have the things that you'll want to work on. Obviously, all of us are doing that, and then you'll adapt it based on your opponent or what you saw from the previous games and what you want to change. None of that's in here. This is what I did first. So you're correct, Jeff. I just went through this to get the loads right, and then I put in the kind of the guide to the sessions and the topics as it got into closer to the season and what we were trying to accomplish.
And then your activities based on your physical loads that you were doing really dictated what you could or could not do with those players.
Correct. So this was the massive light bulb moment, Jeff, that I was talking about. Is I am just a detail-oriented person. That's just who I am. But I would go through and put all of our curriculum in first, like what we were going to try to do from blocks. And I wasn't even thinking about this in this kind of level or detail. And that's what led to a lot of the injuries. I would change a lot that I did in high school as a high school coach because of that schedule is so crazy. It's driven what I do with college now, obviously, and then with the club environment and not scheduling back-to-back tournament weekends, things like that. And if you have to because of college recruiting, because you got to get exposed, and you just have to be aware of it and make sure that they're able to play because they're not going to get exposed if they're injured. So, but yes, Jeff. So then I went through and go, okay, that's got to be a medium load session at the most. How does my actual session look like that day in defending in the attacking third or something like that? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Let's see what you got. So this was what I had. So if you had in this area, potentially down in here, and you might have had high, that's fine. I'm just saying that this is where you could hit them a bit harder, and then possibly down here. Just have to be careful with, notice there's these 3 games that are in this week before, and then the 4th one that kind of comes in quick after this. So this was a tough block for us. So I think when I think about it, Jeff, I think this actually ended up being lower load sessions actually in reality. But I was aware of it and based on some of the feedback from the players. But hopefully you were close. I joked with Jeff the other night that my daughter, her name is Bryn, she's 12 years old. She got it right, just so you know. It's colors, man. She knew the colors. She knew you can't go higher on that. So, all right. And then this was October. You can see we actually gave them some extra days off to try to help with the residual fatigue because we went into the playoffs. We wanted to get into the playoffs. Pool recoveries are happening a lot in blue. You can see that. I'll talk about that in a second. And this year, Jeff, we made it to the NCAAs. So, and that Mary I was talking about, all conference, got some All-American recognition. So it was just fantastic. So she really, really bought in, and so did the team. All right, so here's the thing. So that's all well and good and how you plan that, but how do you know once you're in the season that you're hitting those targets? So if I want a medium load session, how do I know? And some of you probably are aware of this. So RPE, this is one basic way to track it. And one way to relate it is maybe this scale of 1 to 10. So the 8, 9, 10 would be that heavy load, hard load game type. So if they're falling in this, or it was a really hard kind of training session that you did that had a major fitness component in it. The medium part would probably be in the like 7 through 4. So in here a little bit. So if they're giving you a 5, then you know, okay, I'm pretty solid in the medium department. And then down here would be low load in the 2, 3s. So just so you're aware, that's what I was trying to target. So that's rating a perceived exertion. So the players are telling you this based on how hard it is and how much it hits them physically. It's not how hard they work, right? Because that's a misconception sometimes that they're telling you. Like, I always work hard. So it's always you had a really easy recovery session and they're still telling you 10. So you just got to maybe explain to them that, okay, I know that you're focused and you're working hard, but how did it actually make you feel? Like, could you go out there and do it again for another 70 minutes, kind of thing. So it's a little small, but this is what I did. So I just got a clipboard and an Excel spreadsheet and I printed it out. And then these columns are the training days. The gray is the games. And then this would be the end of the week or the cycle. And then it ended up after a couple weeks in, these are players that were playing heavy minutes and these are players that were playing less minutes. So it does start to separate how detailed you want to get. But I started originally just having them all together up here. But you can see these are their RPEs for that day. And here's the average. So this is how I checked it. Jeff, you were asking about that. So this is what if I hit a 1.8, that's in the low range. 4s are in the medium. 2 is right before a game. And then the game was in the 8s and the 7s. You can see in between we had a recovery session. And then you can see into the next week, it builds up and then goes back to the games. And then if you look down here with players that are low minutes, we hit them a little bit harder in training. So, and I think you had a good question, Jeff, the other day. You asked about what we would do. So maybe on a Monday or Tuesday, this group was playing like 5v5. And maybe the group that was here, they might go in for 1 bout or 2 bouts max, if that, and then the others would play the bulk of the time to try to keep that level up. And then, because you could see in the games they're on like 4 and 2 and stuff like that. But this is how I tracked it. Go ahead, Coach.
Just a quick interjection here, because for some people, they may not know, exactly what this rate of perceived exertion is. Basically, it's a subjective way for you to check in with your players. And Kirk and I talked a little bit about it. It's probably good to do this. For one of the teams that I work with, we just had one of our managers. They would have a clipboard and they would see a player individually. We thought it would be better to ask the players individually after a particular exercise so they didn't see what other people were rating, and they just tell you where they were at, and that's their perceived notion. Again, it's subjective, but I think over time they start to figure out, and you can get somewhat of an accurate read, or at least enough to give you some direction as a coach, where you may have a particular day you're doing pressing and you're working in the attacking third of the field. So the players that are really going to be active in that particular activity are going to be your 9, 7, 11, your 10, those forward positions, attacking midfielder. Asking those players after a session there, they would probably rate a much higher than your back four if you have them involved in that activity. So just want to give a little background. It's subjective, but I found it to be, a way for me to gauge kind of where I was at, what I was delivering to the players. So, okay.
Yeah, good stuff, Jeff. And he makes a great point on asking them if you can individually away. We did that too, is they'd walk over and then go back, because what they'll do is they'll hear a 5 and then they'll all say 5. So just be careful of them responding to the same about them. It's them individually, and then you can check in with them. But the average was helping me with, like we were talking about, Jeff, if I'm hitting close to a medium load or a high load within that training session. So it gave me some basic feedback, but there are some positional adjustments that might come out. And then goalkeepers weren't in this, so because they were doing some different stuff, so we tracked them separately. But it was just a clipboard, like Jeff said, and then we tracked it, and I threw it into this spreadsheet each night, and it just took a few minutes, and I could see if I hit it or not. Now, with that being said, let me back up for a second. This could be, it doesn't account when I'm just tracking this initially for time, how long your training session is. So meaning if they were a 7 and we only trained for 10 minutes, or if they were a 7 and we trained for 100 minutes, that's a bigger load for the 100 minutes than the 10 minutes. They can recover faster from that. So this was my starting point, and then I just tweaked it a little bit. If you take the RPE, so what that number, that subjective number they're giving you, and you times it by how long your training session or how long they play in a game, that will give you an idea of total training load for that day for that player. So let me show you what I did. So here's training 1, training 2, training 3. So this is that same chart. Here's their RPE, and I trained for 70 minutes. Then here's their RPE. I trained for 90 minutes that second training session. Here's a lighter load that we only went for 60 minutes before the game. Here's their load through the game. Now, I just put in 90 for everyone. If you want to be really accurate or more accurate, because this gives you at least the initial thing, is you might say this player only played 70 minutes, so you put a 70 here. Or this player only played all 90, put 90. But just to show you, that's how I would go even more detail. But this is where I started. So at least I had an idea of if it was working. And then basically, when I was teaching in high school, I was a math teacher. So that is right up my alley, just so you know where this is coming from a bit. But 3 times 70 is 210. 5 times 90, 450. 1 times 60, 60. So 6 times 90, 540. And then over here on the right, it totals everything up. So that would be all those plus the games. That's their overall training load. And one way to think about it is it's like when we were in school and we had a weighted grade or a weighted average. So this is what it would be. So I got this, and then I could start to compare if I'm hitting the loads I wanted to, like here with a low load training session or a medium load training session, and then how is affecting individual players. And then what you do is you check it over a course of time. So if this player, let me look at the top here, they have 1,800, and let's say the next week they're at 3,000, then that's a massive jump. So usually anywhere from 10 to 20-ish% is okay. But if you're going beyond that, that could be a high risk for injury. Or if it's a massive drop, you can find out what happened. But like we have someone here with a 25.5 or 2,550, if they're maintaining in that. So this just helps you see spikes over time and how you can talk about it. Or if there's something that stands out here, that's a number that's way off their normal. So over time, you have to do this for a couple weeks, and then you'll start to be able to look at the individual players and help them out and say, hey, you need to do this, or what's going on, or that kind of thing. And that's where that connection with the student athlete happens. So, all right, let me get here. Okay, so here's just some follow-up on some just like recovery ideas. So avoid static stretching after a heavy load or a game. So that's not necessarily 3 days after you played and you need to stretch. I'm talking about you just had a game, they played it. I think I told you this story, Jeff. Dr. Cohn, John, he said, tell me about this. He goes, after a game, I'm watching and I see the players, they jog across the field, they wave to the fans, they jog back, and then they static stretch in a circle. And John said that drives him crazy. And I'm like, I do that. My team does that.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, well, he goes, when you work out, what happens to the muscles when you have a heavy workout? Well, it creates little tears, so micro tears in the muscles, especially in your legs in soccer. And what you're doing in a static stretching environment is you're tearing it even more. And so it adds anywhere from 24 plus hours to gain full strength back. So I asked him, so what are we supposed to do? He said, you could do some stretching, but it's more dynamic and you hold it less. So it's similar to maybe some of the things you did before the game. So that's one answer and possible solution. The
Great.
pool. So the pool, he raved about it. I tried it and the team loved it after we did it. And my son's team, he would do it in the hotels when we were gone away on tournaments. And so it brings back maybe 12 to 24 hours quicker. So it basically makes that curve go back so it's not as long in time. It helps overall with muscle damage by no impact, natural resistance, and it increases blood flow. So I think, Jeff, you asked about what you would do in there. It'd be similar. It'd be like dynamic movements or, high knees, little things like that you could do that would be similar that you would do again before a game. You could do that in the pool as well.
And Kirk, about how long of a pool session?
Yeah, we average about 15 minutes. So usually, and it's you can have some fun with it too, because they can go around in a circle and then try to go the other way with it and things like that. So, I mean, it can be something powerful, but over time it feels great and really helps bring them back quicker. And then ice baths. So we're all pretty used to this, as a lot of us might be former players that did this a lot, but basically the ice bath even brings it back quicker than a pool. However, it limits your super compensation. So if you remember that curve I had when you went over the baseline, that's where you're improving, like you're building your fitness base, you're building all that, your muscle strength. So if you want that super compensation, so it actually tightens it up, gets you back quicker, but it never allows you to go beyond what you're trying to do. So but if you do it an hour and a half before you go to bed, it increases your sleep quality, which sleep is massive. So what I asked Doc and some of the others is, let's say you have a game on Friday or Saturday, and then you play again on Sunday, is maybe if your players can do an ice bath after the first set of games, and then after Sunday, get into the pool within the next 24 hours. So that's one way to do it. So bring you back quicker and then use the pool to help you in the long run. And then,
Hey, Kirk,
yeah, go ahead.
One quick question about the pool that popped in was, do they give you a range of temperature? Are we just talking about, hey, average pool, you're at a hotel and what they rake it up to, not like a hot tub or anything like that?
Yes. Yeah. I've just used, the normal, just ones that, like you're saying, at the hotel we'll go. Sometimes they're indoor, sometimes they're outdoor, depending on when it is in the season. I didn't get too deep into that. Gotcha. It shouldn't be they weren't doing it in the hot tub. That's for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then the final little tidbit I have is sleep. If you get 8+ hours, decreases your chance of injury by 15+%. So that's a massive part of recovery. So that's when your body heals itself quite a bit. So those are some tips. Then we did this with a team. So bear with me, the last two kind of main slides is we started to give them some points for these different types of recovery habits, anywhere from the active warm down we talked about, nutrition. This is pool recovery, no ice bath. You can see sleep, meals, foam rollers, hydration. And then we had them track it. So it's kind of neat for them to see where they were at, so they could do this personally. And then at one point we gave them a chart where they would track it over the week and try to see if they could get into the 100 points on some of that stuff through the week. And so it could be used for club, could be used for high school. It just involves them actively in their recovery. And so it's kind of neat to involve them in that. So here's kind of my summary, Jeff. This is what I did. So I take my season calendar, I put in my games, my training, my off days, and then I put in the targeted training loads, which you saw when I showed you the season calendar. And a lot of us have pretty much most of our calendar there. I don't necessarily control for the college level when the games are played. I'm not always given, like in club, I didn't get the training days I always wanted. Like my son trains right now. Well, he's not training right now, but when he was before, it was Monday, Wednesday. So Monday was always after a weekend of games, but that was his day. So you don't want to just give him off the whole time. So you just got to figure out that's a recovery day, and then you can try to continue to learn and grow in that. But then I went through what I could control. What I can control is the training loads to my best ability. So I try to target these in those areas. Then the second piece was I would track the RPE, which Jeff was talking about. He uses a clipboard. I did the same thing. We just asked them individually. And then I timed it by in their duration of the training session. So I just did, okay, that was an hour session or that was 90 minutes. And then I tried to then get even more detailed with the amount of minutes they played. And some of you in high schools maybe get stats and have people that can do that. Club, you might be able to do it pretty close, or if everyone plays about a half, so you could do that instead of the full 80 minutes or 70 minutes or whatever. And then stress the recovery habits. We just went through those and involve them. It could be some fun to have them in it. And then adjust and adapt as needed. So meaning players that maybe didn't play as much, or you start to see, wow, this person was at 1,800 last week, and then now they're at 3,000. Why did they jump up so much? It could be your games that you put in there, but just try to start to look at that stuff and hopefully make that connection with the players. So that's where I'm at, Coach.
All right. Awesome. Well, Kirk, thanks. There's a ton of great information in there for us. Again, from MICE's perspective, we just try to put out some information for coaches to use in their environment. Obviously, the range of people on this call are, people that might do this as full-time, as, they're living and doing this full-time like yourself, and you get an opportunity to spend time with the detail. But for some of us others that are coaching, club, we're not at it full-time and we have regular jobs. Some of the takeaways, I think, for me, that would be easy enough to do even in a club environment would be the RPE, just to check in with players and get that subjective view of theirs, to give you some guidance. I think also just the notion of having a little foresight, because even in a club environment, we know what days we're going to be training. Like you said, your son, he's a Monday, Wednesday training. That's their time during the week. So we can have a little bit of foresight and plan ahead. I think a lot of times when we get going into a season and we see and hear coaches telling their kids to work harder and to give more, or that's their halftime speech or their post-game speech, and quite frankly, they may not have any more to give based on where they're at and what they've come from the last week or so heading into those games. So I think just having an awareness of this idea of periodization could be really helpful to a lot of people. So there are a few questions in here. Let me jump into the chat and a couple of comments here as well.
And Jeff, just so people, because I know I haven't looked at the questions, but I have a feeling we're gonna lean into some of the sessions, the actual kind of sessions themselves. And so I think it got to be clear that I just went over the overview of planning your actual season.
Hey, buddy.
There's someone that's unmuted.
Yep.
Coach Jordan.
Jordan, if you could mute, thank you.
Okay. But having, like, if you go into actual individual seat, like we didn't talk about the sessions, like we mentioned that's not what this focus is. The next layer to this would be then, how do I create sessions and deal with the day-to-day within a microcycle that week on getting a heavy load session, getting a medium load, getting a low load within my topic. And I think that's a whole another spectrum of discussion. So it's more about the initial planning. And then maybe with the RPs and seeing if you're close based on the team giving you the feedback. But just want to make sure everyone's clear on the scope we were trying to hit in tonight's discussion.
Yeah, and Kirk, at Missouri State, do you have access to athletic trainers that can help you with ideas, concepts, things like that? Lori asked something about that, because for a lot of people out here, we don't have that access. We don't have a background in it. So to what level do you guys at Missouri State get help?
I mean, we do. We have a trainer, but I think some of these concepts and stuff that I'm trying to implement, I actually I had a discussion with the team, so they knew the basics. I presented it to them, and I actually have had some right now. Currently, I'm working on some like chalk talks with the team on different topics within our Missouri State team, so that they can continue to understand what we're trying to do. But yeah, the trainer was there, but all of the stuff that I'm talking about with the planning and everything, she would talk more about maybe some recovery stuff she could do with them, or someone I thought saw foam rolling, that's used a lot, so that's effective. So things like that. So yes, I had that access that they could do that, or if I asked them to run a warm up or a dynamic warm up or a cool down. But then Jeff, what I did is I learned from that and documented it and then provided it with our leadership council or your captains, and then they started to run it. So yes, they're definitely a resource. But I was trying to really figure out a way that I could use it, not just in the college, but also with my son's club team or in a high school environment where I might not have access.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the real world for a lot of us, is we
Correct.
don't have access to that. And I think just education, finding books or things like that can be good resources for you, or talking to somebody who's got experience in that. We had another question from Greg regarding loads as far as keepers. Does that vary the guidelines, or how did you do that with your goalkeepers?
Well, a lot of the loads that they're going to get hit were in training, weren't necessarily the games, unless it was a really tough opponent. And so we were aware of that, especially when we had this past season 3 keepers. And so there was one keeper that she got all conference. Actually, she was playing most of the time, so we had to vary it with the other 2 and how we were going to cycle their loads in through the week. But the basics and the premise behind it all was similar. So if we're hitting them, if we're like, they're not going to play this Sunday or whatever, then we need to hit them on Tuesday. And then the one that did play didn't get hit like that. She was serving a ball or helping us potentially. And then we tried to get them to that 8, 9, or 10 so that they stay at that fitness level if they happen to have to go in. So yes, but it was usually more in the training sessions.
Gotcha. That's good insight for the goalkeepers. Vanessa chimed in when we were talking about how to record RPE, and she said Google survey links are probably a good way. I think the important thing that Kirk mentioned is, I think kids, especially younger kids, they and even if he's thinking about it at the collegiate level, is they hear one kid give a score, they may be more inclined to be influenced by that as well, thinking, hey, they said 5. I really feel like a 7 or 8, but I'm not going to say that because that, might make me look bad. So I do think any way you can do it and touch base with them individually. So if there's Google survey links that they can do and keep a running track record, that's a good way to do it as well.
Yeah, I think honesty too, Jeff, is having these discussions where they don't go, I work hard all the time, it's a 10. They got to know what it means for them, and it takes time. But I agree, Vanessa is 100% correct. 3 years ago, I'm not technically sound on all the fancy stuff sometimes, so I just did it with a clipboard. That's how I was doing it. But certainly right now, I have it all online. The surveys they fill in, they do that way. I mean, there's just so many different little tricks that you could do to make it very efficient and effective. I was just showing you how I started.
Yeah, well, that's me. That's how I'm starting. The clipboard, old school.
Yeah.
Chris asked, what kind of advice would you give coaches now on how to periodize because of the lull that we're all in right now, and the kids are out and they're getting some technical work, they're touching a ball, doing some stuff in their backyard, maybe finding some ways to do that. But obviously, and that's on, at MISA, when we're evaluating through this coronavirus episode that we're going through, is how do we bring kids back, what kind of competitions. And as a result of that concern of ours for the kids, our inclination is we've missed so much, we got to get them fired back up as quickly as possible. And we just recently, decided State Cup is, because of the recommendations of the startup time, we're not going to have the time for kids to get ready and be prepared to play in a competition like that. And I think as we continue down this road, there are those concerns that there's going to be this inclination, this instinct to get out, get back after it, give these kids, some value, but they really haven't had the time to really ramp up.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not trying to call my son out, but he's a 2020 that state cup. This was his last state cup, but as a father, I was concerned about it. So how is he going to all of a sudden maybe just train a couple of days before and then go play in that competition? The injury potential it could be massive. So it's and he's spending a lot of time on Xbox right now. So I don't know if he's getting himself physically ready for where he needs to be. But the way I approached it with the college team is we 2 weeks ago, we said we got 18 weeks until our report date. And so we're looking at it as our kind of our off season, getting ready to come in at that moment. But you're right, with some of the club environments and some of the tournaments, there has to be time for them, unless you have a way for them remotely to be doing these workouts. We use an app. So Rise app is one way that has soccer specific fitness, and it gives a whole bunch of things that they're doing. And I'm doing it. I couldn't walk for a couple of days, Jeff, just so you know, but I think you're going to have to, I think at the bottom line, at the very least, you're going to have to take that into account. Like you just said, you can't just have them walk all back into a training session and then they're just going to they're going to be able to kill it and be able to play at a high level with the soccer actions that they are expected to do. So it's good. Yeah. Good point. I don't have the 100% the answer. I think it varies based on the team, the age, the different things, but certainly could have some discussions with individual coaches at another time to try to help them out with that.
Sure. And I know that one of the things that we're doing with one of the group of players, high school group, age group of players, is we have a group me, and we just ask the kids to go in, and if they go out and do some type of fitness, whatever that is, just to put it in there. And kids see that, it can inspire them and motivate them to go out. And that group kind of approach has really worked out well. I think it gives the kids, kind of gives them a sense of still being together as well, checking in with each other. So we've done that. One of the challenges, Kirk, that I know that, especially high school coaches face is the brutal schedule. My daughter's group, they had 15 games scheduled in the month of April. And and that's a couple of tournaments mixed in there. And, from a coaching perspective, some of that is controllable, some of it's not. But I would recommend that people have conversations with their athletic directors to see if they can have some input on the scheduling. Because a lot of times, if you have a rapport with the athletic director and you try to get them to understand some of the concerns you have from a fatigue injury perspective, that you might be able to make, some headway with them when it comes to scheduling. So just another thought out there for people in that environment. Levi asked, how effective is foam rolling? Do you have thoughts on that or knowledge?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of scientific knowledge behind that one, but we use it like all the time. So, I mean, they're in there, even in our lifting sessions that we've scheduled throughout the season. Those are more maintenance and foam rolling and getting them ready. So I think it's definitely it was one of the points on the chart. So I would say, and my son carries it with him wherever he travels on his different soccer tournaments. And it helps, loosen them up and just not allow the muscles to get too tight. So it's definitely a way to do it without like stretching them and ripping them kind of thing. So I would encourage it.
Yeah. And I think that, thanks for that point. Greg throws a point out there, in the real world, our kids do so much. And, this whole RPE rating can be impacted and influenced on things that they're doing, because some of our players in the club environment, they may do multiple sports at one time. And that can have a huge impact on how they're rating themselves, or just in general, their health and their fitness level. So Greg, that's a good point.
Yeah, Jeff, that comment comes up in every physical periodization conversation that I have, is how do you deal with multiple sport athletes, things like that are doing stuff on top of soccer. And unfortunately, it's a matter of my personal is to, I have some basic, obviously, background on it, and is to try to know what those players are doing. And then I adjust. So I try to keep their health and spirits in mind and just make sure that they're ready to play for us when we can. But you also try to educate the parents and them, because we talked about how, when they're younger, 10 and all that, they're doing like 6 soccer games, and then they're playing volleyball, and they're going to baseball, and they're doing all this. And then us as parents, once they get to 13 and they start to hit puberty and all that, think, oh, they're older, so they can do more. They can keep it going, where it's completely the opposite. You want to kind of be more focused on it and how your loads are going through your weeks and how each of them are affecting themselves. But I agree with that comment. It's us to try to be aware and try to maybe use them as bumpers or something like that within your training session where they're involved somehow, but they're not getting the loads when they just had a cross-country meet that they ran in all weekend or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that, your point about making a connection with players, when you build that rapport with them and get to a level where you have that rapport, then you're more apt to get an honest answer from them, and that's all we can do in those situations. We have just about 2 minutes left, Kirk, so I'm just going to hit another one or two. Somebody asked, Ted asked about, can you go into any more detail about static stretching? When is it good to do static stretching? What's the thought on that these days to do that? I know dynamic stretching is what most people are doing now.
Yeah, Dr. Cohn's answer, when I talked to him about it again, I think it was about 6 months ago, was he tries to avoid it within his environments. However, one of the ideas was, let's say you play games within the weekend and you try to do some dynamic and pull recovery. Let's say you had a Monday training session and then Tuesday you're feeling a bit tight. So foam rolling, that would come back to that. But also be, okay, maybe I can static stretch a little bit there and try to loosen up a bit. So I wouldn't do it directly after a heavy load or a game. That would be the thing I would 100% try to avoid. But maybe static where you're holding it for a few seconds and not just 30 seconds, that kind of thing. So you kind of keep it a little bit, I'm not trying to make up a new word, but maybe it's semi-static, and it's not fully dynamic. But yes, I wouldn't, you don't have to avoid it 100%, but I just got to be smart about when you do it.
Gotcha. Tom throws out a thought, law of durability, start slow and fitness will last longer.
Love it, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. So my closing thought, Kirk, as we wrap up is, anytime as a coach, hopefully we're lifelong learners and we're always out gathering information that will ultimately put our kids in a better environment where they can maximize their potential. So I think that as coaches, we can try to educate ourselves as best as we can, think about some of these ideas and how they could apply to our environment. How can we make it better for our players? Because ultimately that's what we should all be doing. So I want to thank you for sharing some of the knowledge and experience that you had. Your case study of the last 3 years was great to hear, and certainly resonates that it's something that you've done and you've experienced over the last few years. So we are going to post this on our website, the recording. So in the next day or two, we'll have that out there. We'll post the recording for this. And again, on behalf of MISA, we hope that everyone stays safe and healthy. And we look forward to our days to get back out on the field with our kids. But keep educating yourself. This downtime has been great to try and gather some new information, a luxury that we don't always get. So everybody, thanks so much. And Kirk, thank you. And we will end now. Thank you guys very much.